The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinski, and on my right, Republican Town Councilor Chris Shortell. Chris, there's a couple of things in the national news that popped up. I want to pop them on you, see what you think.
Sure.
First one is has to do with climate change, and you know, I've been talking about that ever since the show began. So, but something significant popped up. And I've got three different publications that I follow: New York Times, Washington Post, and the Hartford Courant. New York Times headline went this way. The headline: Bleak UN report on a planet in peril looms over new climate talks. The Washington Post says in bleak report, United Nations says drastic action is only way to avoid worst effects of climate change. The Hartford Courant reprinted the Washington Post story, but the headline was UN raises critical alarm on climate. Nations can't put off cutting emissions anymore, report says. Let me read you a couple lead sentences, and then I got a question for you.
Sure.
You ready?
I'm ready.
New York Times. With world leaders gathering in Madrid next week for their annual bargaining session over how to avert a climate catastrophe, the latest assessment issued by the United Nations said Tuesday that greenhouse gas emissions are still rising dangerously. Quote, the summary findings are bleak, said the annual assessment, which is produced by the United Nations Environment Program and is formerly known as the Emissions Gap Report. Countries have failed to halt the rise of greenhouse gas emissions despite repeated warnings from scientists, with China and the United States, the two biggest polluters, further increasing their emissions last year. The result, the authors added, is that deeper and faster cuts are now required. Washington Post, I won't read as much, but the lead sentence: the world has squandered so much time mustering the action necessary to combat climate change that rapid, unprecedented cuts in greenhouse gas emissions offer the only hope of averting an ever-intensifying cascade of consequences, according to new findings from the United Nations. So, why is it that Republicans don't seem to take these stories seriously?
Because it's a hoax. I'm just kidding.
I know you are.
I'm going to get kicked off the show.
I know you are, but...
Well, I think you're generalizing. You say Republicans don't.
Yeah.
What Republicans don't take it seriously?
About 85% of them.
Where's that data from?
that
You're a data guy. Where's that from?
data is from the number of, it's probably 90%.
Okay.
The number of Republicans that support Trump, and part and parcel of Trump's agenda is to call climate change a hoax, and that the media outlets that report on climate change, unlike Fox, the media outlets that report them are fake news, and you know that kind of thing. But if I'm wrong, and if you're going to tell me the Republicans, yes, are generally concerned about it, then I would serve you up a Craig Fishbein, Len Suzio, you know, the Republicans in the state legislature that don't like to hear anything about this, the right-wingers at the state capitol that want to not teach climate change and teach an alternative science if they're going to do that. But you take it from here.
I love how I'm like the
me
spokesperson for all Republicans, which puts Republicans in a bad spot.
That's the hand you've been dealt, young man. So I can't.
I think. I don't know where to start. I don't think it's a hoax. All right,
Okay.
maybe I should start there. But I do think that you correct me on this. The climate models are complicated, and there is some disagreement to the extent of how bad it will get. We get a lot of doomsday scenarios. We've had them since, well, forever, but Al Gore's movie, 12 years ago, Inconvenient Truth, some of those didn't pan out as much. There was a pause, which is since unpaused. I think 2016 was the hottest year on record. But there was a pause that no one could explain on the climate side. So my point is, it's a complicated science, and there's a mixture of some of it's naturally recurring, and a lot of it isn't. So I think that it's a complicated thing to market to people. And I also think the doomsday scenarios that don't all come true turns people off. And I don't have an answer to that, but
Where do you stand personally?
I think it's a big problem, because I think when you read the science behind it, and you read the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, is it like 480 parts? The number is scary, and it seems that most of it is due to man-made emissions. So I think that we helped cause it, but I also think that there's a lot of different solutions, and I don't know that the solution is we blow up our economy and we all go to solar and wind.
Wait. Don't give me the false choice stuff. I mean, no one's talking about blowing up the economy.
The Green New Deal wouldn't blow up the economy.
Well, we're not talking about the Green New Deal.
You're all Democrats now. I was all Republicans. Now you're all Democrats.
We're not
you have
talking
to
about
answer for the Green New Deal. If
No,
I have
I
to
don't.
answer
No,
for Craig
the
Christian.
Green New Deal is very vague and not to be taken all that seriously. However, sort of the thought and the heart behind it has some merit to it. But I'm not going to get off on that. You can't pivot away to the Green New Deal.
Okay.
Climate change needs to be addressed in a serious way by countries, on a country level and also by a state level. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree.
Let's move on.
That's it.
That's it. Unless you want to get the last word.
I'm going to get the last word.
Get the last word.
I think that
because there's always another show that I'm going to come back.
I know
and
you. I think that the environmental movement did itself a huge disservice when it demonized nuclear power in the 70s, because everyone's like, oh, if we could just find some magic form of energy that's carbon neutral. We did. And look what they did in the 70s, at least in America. Now, in Europe, it wasn't.
The they being?
The environmental movement. Because lo and behold, in the 70s, when it was global, global cooling was the concern in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
So we can blame this all on the
environment. Not blaming it, no, but my
point...
We
can blame government inaction on the environmental movement.
What I'm blaming them is that they effectively, I just think that that's a solution. You all want to be like France. You guys on the left, you like socialist countries. Look at France, how they get their energy. So I just think that is a component of it. It's complicated, though, but I agree with you that we should be doing something as a country. So
we're going to revisit this.
Yeah, I know we are.
When this is a dominant segment on the show, and you better do your research before.
Okay.
So there's something else that popped up in the national news, and I want to run this by you. What triggered this segment of the show was a piece in the New York Times about, the headline: Ohio high school plans to drug test all students at least once a year. And this was a private school. It wasn't a public school. So you might expect it more, from a private school than a public school. But I want to read you a couple of sentences, then ask you a question.
Sure.
This is the debate about whether schools can test their pupils for drugs dates back to before 2002, the year the United States Supreme Court upheld the random drug testing of public students. The 5-4 decision expanded an earlier ruling that endorsed drug testing for student athletes. The case made national headlines, and I went back to some reporting on that 2002 case. Justice Thomas, I think, wrote the majority opinion, and part of what he said was it would make part of what he wrote in defending or justifying drug testing for public school students, it would make little sense to require a school district to wait for a substantial portion of its students to begin using drugs before drug testing was allowed, to institute a drug testing program designed to deter drug use. And then the Centers for Disease Control, cited in this first New York Times article, said that about 37% of school districts had adopted a drug testing policy. What about Wallingford? Would that fit in Wallingford?
Would it fit in Wallingford?
Yeah, would it work? Would someone be taking their political career in their hands if they suggested that we do this? And I say, would it fit? Wallingford's kind of town, you don't like to discuss your problems, everything works well. We don't want to say we have a
don't
drug
like to
testing
discuss
program because then it seems like we have a problem.
You're on fire tonight.
I guess so.
Wow.
But you got the mic now.
Well,
so.
I mean, I was going to tell you what I thought about it, but
Yeah,
you threw me a curveball. You said, well, it would fit. Well, Wallingford doesn't like change, so no, I don't think it would fit. How about I'll start there. I don't think it would fit in Wallingford. I don't. There's a philosophical argument, and then there's a pragmatic argument.
Give me both.
So pragmatically, the question is, would it work? I did a little research as well, showing that there is not a lot of evidence that these types of things work to deter drug use. 2018. Well, first of all, let me preface this by saying there was a 2018 report from the National Institute on Drug Abuse that found drug use among teenagers at its lowest point in 2 decades. Now, vaping has gone up, so vaping is not is a new phenomenon. But then there's a number of studies I found. A 2013 study looked at 14 years of data on student drug use and found that school drug testing was associated with moderately lower marijuana use, but increased use of other more dangerous illicit drugs. 2014 study found that drug testing was not associated with changes in substance abuse, and a 2013 study compared drug use rates among schools with and without the drug testing, did not find any correlation. So that's what I could find.
Yeah.
A cursory look showed that there's not like there's research that says this would work. Now, philosophically, I just think it feels like when you lose recess, because that one guy in the back, that Brzezinski kid, keeps talking about the climate and the wind and the solar, and he won't be quiet. So
He's right, though. He's right.
And he's right. Wind and solar, but he won't put it on Nantucket. But anyway, but we lose recess because of that one kid. And why do I have to lose my recess? Because you couldn't stop talking during class. So it just feels invasive. It feels Big Brotherish to me. It feels like, and to me, we're the parents in all this. And I understand there's a whole nother discussion there, but I have a huge philosophical concern with it. And I would still have it, even if the data said it worked, I would still struggle with it. But I don't see any reason to do it. That's my take.
I'm not advocating for it. When I read it, I thought it was a plausible enough idea
To talk about.
to discuss with you. Now that you've killed it, I'm happy with that. No, you've killed it.
Wow.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. We can move on if you
Yeah,
want.
we got to move on.
All
We
right.
got a lot of other heavy stuff.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
It's only getting better. It's only getting better.
Back in September, there was a story in the Record Journal written by Lauren Tekors. You know a lot about this story. I'm going to read you the lead sentence, and I'm going to hand it off to you. All right. Lead sentence says, several town council members clashed. I'm looking at you, man. Several town council members clashed with Mayor William W. Dickinson Jr. last week during a discussion on whether to require the town clerk's office to post meeting agendas and minutes of town boards and commissions on the town website. I'm just going to stop there and hand it off to you, and you go wherever you want with it.
This is the best show ever. All right.
Clasher.
So let me give a little backstory before the epic clash with the mayor. Let me give a little backstory. So a certain rabble-rouser in town wrote an editorial in the paper, I believe in August.
Yeah, I think that's when
about the lack of some commissions. I want to say it was the Pension Commission or the Parks and Rec. One of them. You were the person. Just spoiler alert. It was Mike.
It was a darn good article.
It was a very good
article.
article.
It was a darn good column.
It was.
Go ahead.
You wrote an editorial lamenting that there were minutes missing. And I have to confess, because I try to keep up, I was on vacation, and I completely missed your editorial, like for weeks. And then Craig Fishbein put it on the Ordinance Committee agenda.
Put what on the Ordinance Committee?
Discussion and possible action on the posting of minutes, on an ordinance requiring the posting of minutes on the town website.
Okay.
And I thought he was just, Craig does stuff like that. I'm like, okay, Craig's being Craig, and that's,
All right. What
fine.
happens?
So then we get to the meeting.
Yeah.
And then that's when I think clashing might be an appropriate word, because
Did you clash with the mayor?
I don't know if I clashed with the mayor. I
didn't think you did.
You can read the last line of the article.
I didn't think you clashed.
I was respectful about it, but I disagreed with the mayor.
Okay. Who else clashed? Because it said several.
Well, Craig.
He clashed? I thought he was fairly low key.
Yeah, Craig. Yeah, no, not Craig.
No, seriously, I thought he was fairly low key.
That's right, because you were there. I'm trying to think. Craig did.
Craig presented it. Craig Fishbein kind of opened up the topic. You kind of weighed in, and I didn't think John Letourneau weighed in a little bit, but John was pretty low key.
Okay.
I didn't think anyone clashed until it came to my turn.
You were You
I
and
was
the
at-
mayor, it was like watching
I didn't mean to
Gandalf and
interrupt.
Saruman, and
I-
like
I didn't
5
mean
people
to-
are going to get that reference, but that's a good reference.
You finish.
But so here's my well. Let me so at that meeting we discussed this, and the mayor was kind of indignant, saying, the mayor basically said, I'll look into it. But the mayor was basically saying, nobody's asking for this. You came in from the audience and said, well, I'm asking for it, and I have asked for it, or you were, as a citizen, no pun intended, you were looking for it. And I think on the council, a lot of us were kind of like, what's the big deal? We don't think it's a big lift to scan a document or post it. What I will say is, so then the follow-up was the mayor was going to send the next ordinance meeting in October, the mayor was going to give an update, and we would proceed from there. So he said he'd look into it. And what happened was, prior to that, he sent me a letter on October 2nd, after he looked into it. And basically, the headline from the letter is that he felt that 15 of 23 active boards and commissions have minutes posted online already, and agendas and minutes. They all have agendas. And he said getting the additional 8 is not a problem. So he agreed. So he ended up agreeing. So that's the headline. So makes me happy. We all should be happy. He did say, though, before he got to that point, that he felt that the discussion that the council had was a little bit, how did he phrase it? Extremely disingenuous, as it was presented in a manner that a listener or participant, myself included, could believe that no minutes are on the website. That was so he felt that our discussion was misleading. My issue with that is this was an agenda item, and everyone knew the item was on the agenda. So number one, I would say to Craig, and I have said this to Craig, you could have just made a phone call. There'd have to be an agenda item. If you read Mike's editorial, you could have called the mayor and said, what's up with this? But it had to be on the agenda. So, okay. The mayor, as CEO of the town, could have known this going into the meeting.
Could have known.
That in this letter, he could have already had this information if he wanted to. And
He could have known the status of the town's website.
Sure.
And I think,
And he didn't. So
and
that
I
was a
think
little
everyone assumed he did know. But go ahead.
Well, and I think that a lot of times with the mayor, when I disagree with the mayor, a lot of times what I disagree with is he doesn't like to communicate. And I think there's a lot of good news that he should communicate on a lot of fronts. And he's just somebody who wants to communicate the bare minimum sometimes. He's very conservative. And I think this is a scenario where, had he looked into it before the meeting, he would have basically said to you, we have most of these online, we can work to get the rest, and it would have diffused the whole thing. But instead, he chose not to. I don't know why. And then I question you. Let me ask you a question, because I question myself as chair of the committee. Should I have done a better job of preparing everyone for the meeting? I mean, I don't feel it's my job as chair to hold the mayor's hand or hold Craig's hand and say, hey, you guys, you better be prepared. So I don't know, maybe it was my failing as chair of the committee for that meeting, that I should have had them better prepared. But
I'm not making that criticism, and I don't think that's the case. I think everyone assumed, and has a right to assume, when there's a matter on the agenda, everyone is reasonably prepared for the subject matter.
right.
And so I think when Craig presented it, I think Craig reasonably assumed that everyone was on the same page with respect to the status of the website, that everyone, including the town CEO, knew what minutes were up and what minutes were not up. And,
Right.
And because there were such serious lapses and gaps, that an ordinance was being considered. Start from there. So Craig makes a presentation, assuming people are kind of with it and have a clue. Who knew? The mayor had no clue. I mean, I was dumbfounded. I think Craig was dumbfounded. I think we were all dumbfounded. The mayor had no idea what the status of his own website was, and that led to this clashing, I guess. You know?
Yes.
So, I got one more sentence to read to you. Any more background you want to add? Have we covered it pretty well?
All
right, let me read the
I'll
sentence.
think about that. Yeah.
According to the article, the councilors concluded, according to Craig Fishbein, that they didn't have that power administratively, I think meaning, I'm not sure what that means, that power administratively, and an ordinance would be ineffective given the limited power of the council in a strong mayor system. You read that sentence as well as I did. Do you know, first of all, what was the sense of the council? Did the council give up on this idea of passing an ordinance or considering an ordinance? We don't have the power to pass such an ordinance? Was that the... the feeling?
I'm just thinking back because if this
Yeah.
was an election, the meeting was in October, or no, September. I guess that
September,
was from
yeah.
September. So it feels like it was a million years ago.
Yeah, it does.
My recollection is that when the mayor agreed, the mayor was willing to work with us and to follow up. I think it was more a case of we just didn't. We felt, all right, if the mayor's going to work with us, there's no reason. We don't need an ordinance if he's basically going to look into it.
That happened after the fact. I think the way the meeting was left, there was a debate as to whether this was going to continue on the ordinance agenda or not.
Well, no, it was.
Well, wait.
Yeah.
There was a discussion. As
Yeah.
you, as chair of the ordinance committee, said, "What do we do with this? How do we move?" You know, we've argued back and forth, mainly me against the mayor.
Right.
But do we put this on the agenda for next time, or what's the interest in moving it forward? And the council did not seem all that interested in moving it forward. I think you, as chair, was sort of left in limbo, and then a couple of days later, we get contacted by the mayor.
More than
That's
a couple.
how I-
Yeah, I mean, what happened was I got a letter. I was in Atlanta
Yeah.
on a business trip, so the letter it came in the mail. So I got
Okay.
it a little bit later. So I scanned it.
All right.
It took me 30 seconds, maybe less, to scan it, and then I emailed it to the council with the copy to the town clerk, and I just said to the council, based on this letter, as chair, I am taking this off the agenda because I feel that the mayor has agreed to work with us, and no councilor to
By
date.
way of that letter and a phone call to me, yeah, that's right.
The what? Yeah,
In the phone call.
the letter is not.
So,
It's off the agenda. Unless someone wants to bring it back, they can bring it back. So that's
Yeah.
where we are.
so things have gotten a little bit better on the town's website, but I did a quick check, maybe you did too, as
Yeah,
to
I
what the current status is. And here's my report card.
Okay.
All right. Ironically, the Board of Ethics has no minutes since 2010, and agendas, I think one agenda listed for 2018 and 2019, but no minutes. The Board of Health rarely puts agendas up, but interestingly enough, some of their minutes say draft,
Okay.
because they're unapproved.
Okay.
The Historic Properties Commission, I don't think they meet a lot, but the last minutes put up was 2011. The Pension Commission minutes are still very sparse. There was one agenda for 2019, and they meet quarterly, or they're supposed to.
Yeah.
One agenda for 2018, then you got to go all the way back to 2013
Yeah.
for an agenda, and then you got to go back to 2011 to find one set of minutes. So that's still pretty sparse. Personnel Pension and Appeals Board, there was one agenda for 2019, but I think they've met more often than that. No minutes, and no meetings apparently since 2009, or at least no agendas since
Right.
2009. The Recreation Commission has seen a big improvement. That's since I wrote my column and since we had this meeting in September. So they've come a long way in catching up.
Yep.
That ends my report card. Your thoughts?
I looked too. I found a lot of the same things you found.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these are commissions that don't meet a lot. The big offender was Parks and Rec, and that's one where I get, I'm spoiled. I get the minutes emailed to
Sure.
me as a counselor. So, and I read them regularly, especially with the pool. So I think that's a win. I guess the question for the council is, at what point do we follow up? It's been about, October 2nd. So we're
How
about
about
2
May or
months.
June or something like
May
that?
or June of
Yeah,
2020.
we don't want to
May or
discuss
June of
this.
2023.
I
Maybe.
don't want to discuss this again with you for a while. I mean,
No, but I'm saying as a council, though, when
Yeah.
do we follow up? Like, do we? I mean, I'm thinking. I don't know. There is one.
Well, here's how you'd follow up, and I think following your own advice, give the mayor a call
Yeah. Well, yeah.
in the new year. Happy New Year, Mayor. I just wanted to check in.
But I think that I think yeah. So I think but I'm confident that it'll keep getting better. I appreciate that he committed to it.
Yeah.
I wish it had been a little easier.
So one of the commissions or committees that is supposed to meet, or it's recommended it meet 4 times a year, was formed in 2016, has no agendas online, no minutes online, nothing. They're a mystery committee, and that's the implementation committee. The implementation committee that is supposed to sort of monitor the adoption or rejection of the 10-year plan of conservation and development. You are one of the 2 council members that, by reason of the plan of conservation and development, I think are the council representatives. You're one of the two.
It's a secret.
It's a
I
secret,
might be.
you might be.
I am one of the two.
But it's sort of ironic. There's no sign of the implementation committee on the website. What's going on there?
I can't speak to why it's not on the website. We
Okay.
haven't met that frequently. You referenced a recommended cadence of 4 times a year. We certainly have not met 4 times a year. I want to say we've met. We had an initial meeting in 2016. I recall meeting again in 2017. I missed a meeting. Tom Laffin and I. Tom's the other council rep.
All right. Well-
Tom and I have met separately with Casey Hand, the town planner, to get caught up and to sort of stay connected. So Tom and I actually earlier this year, we had several meetings with Casey in the spring. So we've been trying to stay connected from a council perspective. But as far as the formal committee meetings, and I don't know how successful Casey's been trying to get them together. I feel like
Well, there's a segue between this minute situation
Yep,
and the next topic we're
Sure.
going to, but I'm just looking at the Plan of Conservation Development, and it says within 90 days of adoption of the Plan of Conservation Development, that takes us back to 2016, the town council should establish a plan implementation committee, and the committee should meet at least quarterly to provide updates on progress made by various agencies and coordinate actions for which the committee is the responsible agency and report in an advisory capacity to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Should hold public forums on progress every 2 years. No.
like many things in the POCD,
Okay.
there's the POCD reality, and then there's
Well,
reality.
one of the things in the POCD, the Plan of Conservation Development, is to convene a committee to recommend best use of the historic rail station.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Agreed.
let's talk about the rail station. What's going to happen with that? What should happen to that? I mean, in whatever hat you want to wear.
Well, I think, okay, I think we have to be very careful with this discussion because this is just a hypothetical discussion. Adult education is in there right now, and I don't want it to be perceived that, well, because a town councilor said, oh, we want to do this or that. There is no, there's nothing happening right now with that station. And I think any
Well, adult ed is in there, right?
right, and they're using it. So I think that any future discussion has to begin with the Board of Education and begin with is there somewhere else for that school to go? Somewhere in their other
Well,
facilities.
I'm not interested in being careful. I'm reading the Plan of Conservation Development. See,
Right.
that's my cover.
Okay.
That's my air cover.
Okay.
I'm not trying to embarrass the Board of Ed or try to be sensitive
Okay.
or not ruffle any feathers.
not
I'm just
sensitive.
reading a document that I'm
Right.
supposed to be reading.
Okay.
And it says you're supposed to convene a committee
Which we did.
to recommend the best use of the historic rail station. Now, this looks like a subcommittee, looks like a train station subcommittee.
I don't know that we're
So
convening a
this is
committee.
something that's fair to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's fair to talk about. I'm not saying it's not
Yeah,
fair. I just want to
yeah.
be. Right. I think because I think there's a thought that property could be a in that area downtown. Other towns have flipped their old train stations. Old Saybrook, it's Pizza Works. If you get a business in there, hypothetically, it could draw other businesses. It could spur development. So I think that's what that's referencing. A recommendation. Well, what do we do with it? Do we lease it? But that recommendation could just as likely be we don't do anything with it. Because maybe there's nothing we can do with it.
Well, what do you sense is the pulse of the council?
I think the council would love to. Oh, I don't want to speak for the council. I think we'd love to see better development down there, and I think that could be a key aspect of it. If there was some attraction down there, but I don't know that any counselor would push for that unless they knew that the adult education school could go somewhere.
Stalemate all around?
No,
I
it's
mean,
not
how does that-
stalemate. I'm just saying that it's not as easy as we're going to kick them out and put a brewery in there. I mean, I just think that's what I'm trying to avoid, the perception that that's
Well, then I have to be the bad guy because we can't keep avoiding issues. That's one of the points of the Citizen Mike
Okay,
Show.
okay.
We gotta, hit the issues head on, and
just you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. That's the Citizen Mike
well,
show.
maybe so, but I think we need to talk honestly about it.
Yeah.
So you have an out by forming this committee, just like Sal Menzo says. I only did the school facilities study because the Plan of Conservation required me to do it.
Which
right?
he put in the plan of conservation.
Which he put in the.
put in.
So you have the same excuse. You're going to form a committee, and your excuse is identical. I'm
right.
only forming this committee. My hands are tied because a Plan of Conservation Development required me to do it. Now you form a committee, and I think we know very well that almost all of the town councilors would probably say, let's turn that into a commercial use,
Right.
generate some taxes.
Okay.
I will be the first to tell the Board of Ed. That's what the thinking is, in my humble opinion, based on unfounded rumors. Which means that Sal Menzo has got to start looking for a new place for adult education. This is the perfect time to bring it up because he is kind of revamping the school facility study, and maybe he should be on notice that, we've got to find space for adult ed because the council wants to sell or lease out the train station for some use. Yeah? I mean, isn't that a fair place
Yeah,
to
I mean,
go?
the facility study, I think, is just the 2 high schools and the 2 middle schools. The
No, but if-
strategic
but if-
plan addresses all the.
But if we're spending,
I get it, I know.
over $1 million of our own money, and
Right.
then maybe this is the perfect time to say, oh, by the way, find a home in your facility study
Yeah,
for adult ed. Yeah.
yeah, but I would want to see what they would come up with. So, but yeah, I think you're right. The timing is appropriate if that's the recommendation that we come up with.
So how would this work? Let's say the counselors take a vote on this committee, and or the committee, whoever it is, votes that we should seriously explore turning the old train station into some sort of tax generating property. And Salman says, yeah, I agree. I'll be out in 3 years, or when our lease is up, whatever it is. He says, okay, I'll be out. I'll play ball. We can find a spot as long as you give me, some new high schools or something.
As long as you give me some new high school.
I'm trying to carry the ball forward a little bit.
No, I feel like, so how would this work? The committee hasn't been formed. This committee, we have not formed a committee.
Okay.
That's the first step. So we would have to do that. I think how I seeing it work is, yes, this subcommittee makes a recommendation, but then I view, we bring it to the full council, but then I view I'd like to hear what the public thinks. I would like to incorporate some.
Oh, sure.
Maybe it's a workshop with public comment, or it's an agenda item. Obviously, then it would automatically have public comment. I would be curious to hear the public's reaction to our recommendation, to see what people think, and then we'd see what the council thinks, and then we would have to go from there. So I think that's how I think it would work.
Okay. Just a quick look at the charter that says it's the council has the power to buy, sell, and lease. The mayor doesn't. You don't have to act on his recommendation. The council unilaterally can take the ball and roll it forward. So when should I diary this ahead for? 2024? When should I'll put it in my file, the train station file. 2026, I know how quickly you guys like to move. What's the schedule?
No, I think I expect movement this term. I do. I do. I think that.
All right.
No, let me address that. I think there would have been a little more movement. I think things get fuzzy in an election year, and I don't mean in the way you probably think I mean. You probably think it's not that people are afraid to take risks. What I'm saying, but what I do think happens is
I would never.
You would never say
that.
But I don't think you want to sometimes avoid politicizing something. So I think that there might have been even movement, but I think it's better. Something has to happen this coming year because it's an off year. There's no politics involved where we can do it right. That's what I would say. So I wouldn't diary it ahead till 2025 or, I would.
2020, right?
2020. That's right.
All right. Should we move on?
Please.
All right.
Let's go back to climate change.
Let's go back to climate change. So you and I were talking in preparation for the show in sort of general terms about social media and local elections. Does it work? Does it not work? The place for it. You don't have a big presence in social media. John Letourneau, who was on last week, has none. You both, John.
None that we know of. John may have some aliases.
Yeah, he may, but he's won a lot of elections without it.
Right.
You've won elections, and you don't have a big presence. Give me your general philosophical thoughts on it. Again, I will be your foil.
Good. Let me level set my social media presence in general. I'm on Twitter.
Yep.
I'm fairly active, but I don't do politics. I do other stuff, mostly music related and sports. So I have all these Twitter friends that I don't really even know. They're from all over the country and world. I'm on Facebook marginally. Barely. I'm on Instagram, again, marginally. I post once every few months. So Yeah, I didn't even join Facebook till after I won my Board of Ed seat. So yeah, I've won 4 elections essentially. 3 of them I was not even on. I deactivated, and then this time I was on Facebook, but I hardly ever posted. My thoughts are that I think that it helps you build your brand a little bit if you have a message, but you have to have a message. If your message is crap, being on Facebook is not going to change that. It's just going to draw attention to the fact that you have a not so great message. I also think, though, it can be, as John said last week, it can be nasty. And I think what it often seems to degenerate into is, a 20 post back and forth. And I don't know that an undecided voter is going to sit there and read a 20 post paragraph, yes, I love the mayor. No, I love Jared Liu. No, you're an idiot. The mayor's better. No, Jared Liu. And it's and scroll down. I don't know whose mind that changes. So my take is that no, by and large, I don't put much stock in it, but that's just me.
This election year, for the first time ever, the mayor has had some sort of a very basic website.
Right. Well, no, he had one last time.
Oh, I didn't.
In 17.
It was so quiet, I didn't even know about it.
In 17, he had the similar website.
Oh, okay.
I believe that was the first time.
All right. Why?
Why did he have it?
Yep.
I don't know. I would assume. Do we make assumptions in this citizen?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would
It's
assume that
an opinion show, Yep.
I would assume that he was sort of checking off the box to say, well, I have a website. I don't. You'd have to ask him, though.
Well, Steve Knight wrote a column not too long ago, and he was commenting on the recent municipal elections, and he was commenting on Jared Liu's website, and he made the comment that sometimes, once in a while, in this case, let me just phrase it, in this case,
Yeah.
I think Steve was saying that the website worked to Jared Liu's disadvantage. Did you have one of the same takeaways from Steve Knight's column as that?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give me your philosophical view on that. If you're advising someone, who's a novice, who wants to run for mayor or council, well, let's say mayor for the first time, would you say do what Jared Liu did, and what Elizabeth Warren has done on the national scene? A lot of detail on there. You have a plan for everything. Put it all up on the website. It'll do nothing but help you. Would you give that advice?
Oh, no, well, no, because if you do that, you better get every detail right. You can't have detailed plans, but then say things like that you blame the mayor for the dam breaking when the mayor wasn't even mayor when the dam broke, and no one blamed that mayor for the dam breaking. So, or that he sold the power plant. I mean, you better have your facts straight. So to Steve's point, absolutely, and that's just captured out there in perpetuity when you get things wrong. And then I would also say from a marketing perspective, I said this a few shows ago, no one's going to sit there and read all that. Nobody. I mean, and what's fascinating is you said it too. You really had two websites, and they both were horrible. The mayor's had nothing on it. The mayor might as well not have had a website. And Jared's had like everything on it, videos and position papers and 30-page PDFs. No one's going to read all that. And if you did, you found a lot of mistakes. So I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere where you want to have some information, because a website's a nice thing to drive people to. So it's whether if it's a Facebook post, you can do a 2 or 3 line post, and your call to action is go see my website, for more info or to get a sign or to donate. You can put a letter to the editor and drive people to the website. You can do a digital ad. So the website is a nice destination to drive people to where there's a little more info.
If you want to give money, there could be instructions
how to donate.
How to sign up for a lawn sign.
I thought that
date and place of your fundraiser.
Right. I thought that Vinnie Cervoni had a good website I would say mine was a little bit. I'm a hypocrite. I had a lot of info on my website too. I mean, not as bad as Jared Liu, but nothing against Jared. But I had a lot on. I mean, I had a lot of not plans, but just stuff. But Vinnie had a really good site. I thought Vinnie's site had a lot of well organized information. So I think there's a happy medium somewhere in there. I think the other thing I want to ask you too is, though, when I'm talking about message. The other thing to think about is, who is your message to? Are you trying to sway voters, or are you trying to get new voters who don't vote? Because I think there's different messages there. maybe.
Well, I think there's two goals, and probably at the council level in Wallingford, it's impossible to achieve either one, but I'll just theoretically. I think one goal of a website is introduce the candidate to the voter in about 2 paragraphs to give enough detail that the voter is impressed with the credentials, experience, motivations of the candidate, but not so much detail that they fall asleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that can be useful, and I think it can be a tool of a candidate going door to door or just meeting someone casually. Say, look, I'd really like to talk to you about this more, but it's on my website. Here's my little card or something. Check it out. Call me at any time, and I'll be glad to, And I think the other goal is if the candidate, I'm going to talk about the council level, has some specific policy proposal appropriate to a council level race, you can put that specific proposal on the website, not generic, keep taxes low, improve quality of life,
Right.
Not generic stuff that means absolutely nothing. It's just pablum. But but I haven't seen anything specific by any candidate in the 18 years or so that I've been following this. So that's my
I
your
think
thoughts on that.
I think the tough part is that I'll go back to the message. If you're trying to convince new voters to come out and vote, that's fine. I feel like, though, the tough part with the message is trying to sway people who vote. Because basically you're telling them, well, you're stupid. Because you voted for Wallingford, you're dumb. You keep voting for the mayor and you're dumb. And here's why you're dumb. And here's my 50-page website to explain to you in detail why you're so dumb. Switch your vote. Vote for me. And I just think that's pretty rough.
So a second ago, you just handed me a note. And the note said, we forgot to discuss the issue of whether a board or a commission should post on the website minutes which have not yet been approved. And I want to hear your thoughts on that. And again, I'll try to be your foil.
I don't think you'll have to try that hard because I don't think we agree on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely don't want unapproved minutes on a site.
Okay.
And I say that because as ordinance chair, I've seen a couple of examples where the minutes did not actually reflect the discussion, and it was just a sentence or two, but we had to change them or update them so that they truly reflected the discussion. So I am not comfortable with a body until the body, whatever body it is, whatever commission, until they've approved it. I don't think it should be on the site.
Is this a problem unique to the ordinance committee, or do you think all across town there's a lot of corrections being made to minutes?
I don't know.
Because I see on the council minutes, approving the minutes are on the consent agenda.
Right.
I mean, there's almost, I can't even remember a discussion on the council about correcting minutes.
Oh, there was there was one yesterday.
Was there?
There was one last night.
All right, with that being the exception.
No, I think that sometimes there'll be something amended or grammar. I mean, things like that. I don't know if it's a widespread problem. I just know that it's happened on my committee, and therefore.
Who takes the minutes for your committee?
Well, we've had somebody. The town clerk's office has had somebody recently. It used to be me. So when I did it, it was awesome because I was really. I'm great at minutes. I'm a fast typist. I'm able to do all that. But when I became chair, it was really hard for me to run the meeting and take minutes. And so we have a recording. And then what happened was the recording didn't always come out so well. So we'd hand the tape to the town clerk, and then her team would try to transcribe it and do minutes. And so now we do have somebody. We have a person who's doing it, and she's new and she's fine. But that's who does it now.
So my point is very simple, and then I want to move on. If you're interested in going to, let's say, the pension commission.
Yep.
You may want to prepare for that meeting. You may want to see, what did they decide on last month?
Yep.
And just to prepare yourself, and maybe prepare a question or something. The best thing you can do. Read the minutes from the prior meetings. You get caught up on the conversation. But of course, that can't happen under the Shortell plan, right?
Right. But the good news under the Shortell plan is there is actually an invention, and it's called the telephone.
Well, that
so
takes
you can
away
pick up
the
the
whole purpose of
telephone
websites and minutes.
Call Jim, but no, it doesn't take anything away. You can call if the minutes. So that's a good example. That's a fair point. The pension commission does not meet as frequently as, say, ordinance committee or as any Parks and Rec. So that would be a problem. But I would argue for a committee or a commission which doesn't meet more than a few times a year, yeah, there will be a gap until those minutes are approved. Pick up the phone. If you want to be prepared, take the extra 2 minutes. The time it would take you to read them, you could just pick up the phone and make a phone call.
And then Jim Bowes will get on the phone with me and go over what happened at the last meeting.
Then you have to set aside 5 hours. So that's a bad that example.
I don't want to pick on Jim Bowes. I think your idea is a terrible idea. But it's much more easy to put the minutes and say draft minutes subject to correction
Inaccurate.
on the website. And most boards and commissions don't correct their minutes because they're good the first time. And any corrections are minor and petty and don't mean, don't mean much. The ordinance committee may have a special problem, and we'll talk about that off camera.
Watch last night's meeting.
Let's change the subject a bit. The issue of direct deposit comes up once in a while. It's sort of a political football, and I think it's used as a symbolic argument very often because general government, not the Board of Ed, but the other departments do not have direct deposit, meaning the town doesn't deposit directly into an employee's checking account the paycheck.
Right.
Whereas the Board of Ed does. And the argument for direct deposit is that it's a convenience to employees. They don't have to go to the bank and wait in line. It should be more efficient for general government, but yet Wallingford doesn't have it. And the mayor is often taken to task for that situation. I'm going to stop here, throw it over to you, and give me your assessment of that whole issue and where do you think the merits lie?
Well, I think that's true. I think part of the problem is, though, the general government, a lot of those unions will not go to a 26-week, biweekly pay cycle, and I think that's where the objection is on the administration's part, is that doing direct deposit 52 times a year. And Jimbo said this at our November 12th, not the last meeting, but the meeting before that. This came up with the teacher's contract, and I think it was Councilor Letourneau going back and forth on it with Jim and the mayor, and Jimbo said that for him to actually do the payroll on a 52-week direct deposit basis, he would have a hard time doing it. He'd have to go to 26 weeks to a biweekly, and the unions won't go to biweekly, the town side. So that seems to be the hang up.
It's interesting, through all these years of debating this direct deposit, and again, I think it's used as a symbolic issue to beat the mayor over the head.
Yep.
And in a way, it's a fair point if other governments, other municipal governments are able to have done this years ago, got on either a twice a month or every other week system. Other governments have been able to do it. Why hasn't Wallingford been able to do it? Can it be that they cannot negotiate their way out of a paper bag? They didn't offer enough incentives? Maybe it would have been worth it to Wallingford 15 years ago to offer employees a one-time stipend, $50 to go to direct deposit. Maybe they just haven't tried hard enough and no one really cares in general government. Your thoughts on that?
Sure, you could. That's a fair point. When you go into negotiations, you have priorities, and if you really want to make something happen, you can make it happen. The last teacher's contract, I'm going back to that. I think they said their top priority was like the dress code or something. And I remember Craig about lost it that meeting. So that's an example where they said that their top priority was the dress code. Everyone has. So I guess if Wallingford really wanted it, they could, I guess, somehow give a
Over
carrot.
the years, they might have been able. Should have been able.
Offer a carrot, to the unions to get them to switch. I guess.
Let's call it a night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Next week, we're going to have Vin Testa on the show.
The Dean of Counselors.
Yeah. And thank you, viewers, for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We do appreciate it. We are here on Wednesday nights, but you can watch the Citizen Mike Show on WPAA on Thursdays at 9, Fridays at 9, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays at 9. And that's why for years we've said if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. We're also up on YouTube. Go to YouTube and search the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel. Follow all the usual prompts. And you'll get the Citizen Mike Show on YouTube. Or let me know if you want me to email you a link to the YouTube production, and we can do that too. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Good night.